Hello, this is Tim Chambers, your consciousness coach at multilevelliving.com. One of the best ways that the systems of control in our world of eternal conflict, if you will, are able to keep us in control, and this affects us profoundly in a human behavioral way, in a prosperity way, as well as a spiritual way as well, I believe, is the concept of fear. Keeping people in fear is a great way to keep them under control. So now we have basic physiological fear, like survival fear that affects our adrenaline, our adrenal glands, like the proverbial bear in the forest or the bus bearing down on you when you step off the curb and you jump back. You get that blood rush into your muscles of your limbs, and you are ready to go in terms of jumping out of the way of the bus. That to me is truly a remarkable thing, and it's not really a thought process or belief system oriented type of fear. It's similarly just, quite frankly, reactivity. It's a survival reactivity, instinctual, if you will. There are other types of fear, though, that have to do with belief systems and belief, and they have more to do with, often with thinking based on experiences of the past rather than actual danger in the present moment. If you go back again to childhood experiences where the parent would use like punishment in order to get the child to behave, so this can sometimes put into place reactivity, reactive behaviors that cancel out the ability to respond, the ability to kind of like, okay, what's actually going on here, so I can have a response. Rather, someone, has a tone of voice or, raises their finger. If the finger goes up, gets too close to the face, to my face, I'm going to have a defensive reaction rather than taking a breath, stepping back, and saying, oh, well, that face they made, it's not about me, or that tone of voice, that's something that's about them, it's not about me, or the finger in my face, oh, that person's excited and upset, but it's not dangerous. I'm not about to be, physically attacked or humiliated. So these are ways that we can work through our own belief systems based on childhood experiences or social experiences to lift us out of this reactivity zone, which takes us out of choice, out of response, and puts us into a kind of a almost robotic, it's like an animalistic type of reaction, and that is which takes us out of our consciousness. As well, one of the big existential questions of life has to do with death and what happens after death. So we have been taught throughout, throughout the history of time that death is a bad thing. Now you have like these spiritual paths. If you look at the different religions, Hinduism, which kind of teaches reincarnation, which indicates that after you die, you really don't end. Your consciousness continues, and then you come back into reincarnation to, work out what you didn't work out last in the previous life. You have, in the Christian traditions, you have this concept of heaven or hell, which in its own right has, very controlling belief systems involved. But it does have this faith aspect that you don't end. Even if you go to a bad place, you still are your consciousness remains intact. Okay, so but in terms of like everyday living, there is most definitely a great fear about death, because death is the end of life as we know it in the human frame, in the physical body. So the question here that I would like to pose is, what happens if we don't die? That kind of changes the whole game as far as I'm concerned. And it's about, if we don't die, if we actually do continue, our consciousness remains intact, we have all our senses about us and additional senses, because we're in a vibration system that is not as dense as the physical body and the physiology, the necessary circulatory system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, what's needed to keep the body going. That is no longer required because the body is no longer there. But we have consciousness. So if it were proven, if it were a scientific fact, if it were something that we actually knew, and believed in a real way, then many aspects of control would simply just fall away. Like, for example, you wouldn't necessarily need, health insurance, for example, because it wouldn't be such a big tragedy if you actually passed away, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea of death as finality and the fear involved is a major controlling factor in our lives. And I would just simply posit the question, what are some of the experiences that we do have that indicate maybe we do continue afterwards? For example, the dream state, or the idea of like astral travel. All of us have dreams. Some of those dreams can be very vivid. Many people have the experience of being able to kind of like intentionally control their movements in the dream state. And some people actually can do this concept of remote viewing, where they consciously leave their body and travel to places and describe what they see, and then come back. And the person who in like a laboratory experiment, they'll be instructed to go travel somewhere and describe, a building complex or something, and they come back and they're able to write it, make a diagram which is very accurate to what they were instructed to travel to, some place that's miles and miles away. These types of experiments have occurred. And so the idea that it is a natural thing to be able to leave your body, let your consciousness travel, have experiences outside of your body, and then return safely, is something that I think would be much more natural for people to do if this whole hype about fear of death were not such a strong factor in our world today. So I would suggest that one way to kind of move through this belief system that death is the end, like on a conceptual level, maybe you're a spiritual person and you don't believe it, conceptually, but in terms of practicality, we all believe it because we've been trained to believe it over the past 6,000 years of current civilization. So what is it that we can do to help ourselves to work through that belief? It's to me, the main aspect there would be to go into some type of dream experience, like developing your dreams, writing them down when you wake up, that kind of a thing. See if you can shift into a more conscious dreaming mode and get past the fear of being able to leave your body and come back safely. So it's important to be able to, come back safely, obviously, and keep your consciousness intact while you go through these steps. And this is part of the connection to developing intuition and the ability to experience things that are happening, outside of your analytical, your personal environment. So there we have it. For more information, you can check out multilevelliving.com. This is Tim Chambers, your consciousness coach.